Can you send it out? Yeah. Okay. One sec. Do that. Qur'anic. Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وأهل بيته وذريته ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. So I'm going to talk to you about Afghanistan, but I'm not speaking from any notes. I'm not making any reference to anything in particular. I'm just going to talk about it from a very personal perspective. And some of you may have heard some of this stuff if you come to the IQ Center, and some of you may have not. But I want you to just start, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about someone in his own home. His family have lived there for thousands of years. And something happens that's nothing to do with him, and the force of military come not just to his land, not just to his town or to his region, but to his village and his home. They burst into the house with the most advanced weapons known to mankind. They kill his relatives, and they take him prisoner. They build a prison near his house, and in that prison, they strip him naked, they shave off his hair, they humiliate him, they take pictures of him in this state. They abuse the most sacred thing there is to him, which is the Qur'an. They rip it into pieces, they spit on it, they urinate upon it. When this person prays, because now his prayers are more intense than they've ever been before, they enter his cell and they put their boot on his head and they say, I am your God now, pray to me. This is in his homeland. I want you to think about this for a moment. And now I want you to think that this person is a child of 12, 13 years old. Because what I'm telling you now isn't a story. It's not a make-believe thing just to get you iman high or get you to think about it. This person, his name is Muhammad Jawad. And today, he is one of the chief advisors to the Interior Ministry of the government of Afghanistan. He has people under him. He has a whole department under him. He has soldiers and mujahideen under him. But when I was with him in prison in Afghanistan, he was just a child, 12, maybe 13 years old. Now I want you to think of somebody else. Imagine, same country, same place, same time. A helicopter flies over where you're living. You're home. You know there's an invasion taking place. That helicopter has the most powerful weapons of any attack helicopter in the world. It has the most powerful mini machine guns, the most powerful rockets, and the most powerful bombs that it drops. And it lets loose all of those. Imagine that happened on this building, may Allah protect it. What do you think would happen to the building? And what do you think would happen to those in the building? I'm not asking you to answer, I just want you to think about it. Now I want you to think about this. Out of that, all the about 20 odd people who happen to be in that building, everyone is dead. Body parts, limbs, fingers, blown up faces cut into half, legs missing. Some body parts are cauterized because of the heat of the shrapnel. You know what cauterized means? Cauterized means that it's burnt to the point that the blood stops flowing. An old technique in the old days that they used to do is if somebody was bleeding profusely, they would literally come and heat up a piece of metal and burn it onto that wound to stop the wounding. It's called cauterization. It's even mentioned in At-Tibb al-Nabawi. But this cauterization happens because the shrapnel that's spinning is so hot that when it cuts the skin, it cuts literally like a knife through butter. And instead of causing it to profusely bleed, it cauterizes the wound. But not because they intended it. So in this place, everyone is dead. The soldiers come through, they send down the ground troops. They come down on the abseiling from the helicopter, the same helicopter that's taken out this place. They abseil, special forces, night vision goggles on, with the latest sniper rifles and assault machine guns, and handguns and shotguns. They want to clean up. Maybe somebody lived. And they come and they find someone. And he's barely alive. His eyes gone. His feet, his little toes, some of his toes are literally amputated. But he's moving. So one of the soldiers comes from behind and he puts the gun at his back. So just above his, just below his shoulder blade. And he shoots point blank range. The gunshot is so powerful that the flesh from here, from the opposite side, just above his heart, flies out. But he doesn't die. This also is a child. He's only 14 years old. His name is Umar Khadr. He's a Canadian Egyptian. He's my friend, and I first saw him after he was captured in the state that he'd just been brought in. They'd operated on the front of his body. It would look like, have you ever seen an autopsy? They operated right from here to remove shrapnel. He lost one of his eyes and the other eye he could barely see from. And he had this huge, gaping exit wound. Another child. And I saw all of this and witnessed these people, not in the streets of Afghanistan or the streets of Kabul or Jalalabad or this, where the bustling roads and markets are. I saw this in a prison called Bagram Prison, where the Americans had built a torture site to hold people that they had captured or wounded in 2002 and beyond. Why is this important to tell you? Because as I said before in the talks, I'm conscious that there's many young people here. And I have been thinking about how do I address you on a serious subject? How do I make you connect to it? And so I thought maybe the first thing I'll do is talk to you about the kids. I saw two children brought in, Afghani kids. They were both brothers. One was 16, the other was 11. They decided that the 11-year-old was too young to send to Guantanamo. So they sent the 16-year-old instead. But I remember seeing the day when they allowed the two brothers who were put in separate cells. One was in cell number 1, one was in cell number 6. Each cell had about 20 people in there, mostly adults. So as they were going to send the kid who was in cell 6, who's the older child, the 16-year-old, they allowed him to meet with his 11-year-old brother who was going to remain in Bagram because the 16-year-old was going to Guantanamo. And I saw the parting of these two brothers. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Just as us, as adults watching these two part. And the kid, the 16-year-old saying to us, please look after my brother. And he was sent. Thus far, we've been talking to you about subjects that are all connected to the big world of politics, Bangladesh and Libya and what's happening here. And even though perhaps we might have thought, I'm going to talk to you all about the politics, what's happening in Afghanistan, world leaders and so forth, but that's why I wanted to bring it back down to you. And what this tells you, and why I picked the story of Abdullah ibn Zubair, was to remind you, because, alhamdulillah, we live in very, very comfortable lives. We are amongst the top, we're elite in the whole world. If you were to look the whole world, we as people here in this country are amongst the 5% who live the best. We are so privileged that the type of food that we get, we will complain and say, I don't like this particular type of thing, therefore I'm not going to eat it. And I will get what I want because it's available. In Bagram, Umar Khadr, he's also from a very privileged life. He came from Canada, his father was from Canada, but they were living in Afghanistan. He had memorized the Quran. And in Bagram, they never allowed us, imagine this, you are in a place where nothing is familiar, not the food, not the people, not the clothing, not the environment. You're in a closed building, you don't know whether you're going to live or die, you don't know what's going to happen the next day. You've got soldiers pointing guns at you 24 hours a day. You've got lights like these are on me right now, up high, blasting at you 24/7. You can't sleep even if you wanted to. And everything is strange to you. But there's one thing that you have access to. They abuse it, but eventually you get access to it. That's the Quran. So in the beginning, they rip the Quran, as I told you, they spit upon it, they throw it into the toilet, they urinate upon it, but eventually you get access to the Quran. But if you read that Quran out loud, as you do with tajweed or with a loud voice, it's a punishable offense. And by punishment, that means that they'll take you, they'll storm into your cell, handcuff you, because you're not handcuffed in the cell. They'll handcuff you, they'll take you to the front of the door of the cage, and they'll tie your hand, they'll zip your hands, lock your hands up to the top of the door of the cage, so that you're on your tiptoes. And then they'll put a black hood over your head, and they'll leave you there. Umar Khadr, if you imagine a room, I don't know, 10 times the size of this. And if a voice was to be recited, or even if you say something, even if the scream of the soldier, it echoes. If you recite the Quran, it also echoes beautifully. So Umar Khadr would recite the Quran as a 14-year-old kid, covered, his whole body covered in wounds, with one eye shot out. And he had the most beautiful voice. And I'd look at him and forget all of my own troubles. Look at this child. No complaint. He's not crying. He's not screaming. He's not saying, why me? He's not saying anything like that. He's just patient. He's calm. He's sitting down. Sometimes there's tears in his eyes, and I can't tell, is that because of the wound in his eye, or is he actually crying? I can't tell. And they come along, and they grab Omar. They cuff him, they take him to the front of the cell, they tie his hands above. He has toes missing from his feet, but that doesn't stop them forcing him to be tied up with him on his tiptoes, what's left of them. And Omar is punished, what for? Not for reading the Quran, but for reading the Quran in a way that makes it audible, that you can hear it. So there are numerous stories of kids imprisoned in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo, and beyond. There is a beautiful verse in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُعْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. O Allah, say, O Allah, you are the King of Kings. You give dominion and power to whoever you wish, and you remove it from whoever you wish. And you honor whoever you wish, and you debase and disgrace whoever you wish. With your hand of goodness, you are able to do all things. Those same brothers who were imprisoned with me in Bagram, in Guantanamo, 14 years, 15 years. Imagine 15 years. Some of you are not even 15 years old. That's the equivalent of your entire lifetime. And they went through the same processes: stripped naked, beaten, humiliated, hair shaved, long beard, all shaved, forced to dress in a particular color, orange and beyond, forced to eat this food that you have no idea where it's come from. You don't know even if it's halal, and what little you get is enough to lose your body weight. In some cases, there's a brother here that the brothers here know, lose half your body weight or even more. They go through all of that. They go through the separation of their wives and children. So they have children. Imagine if you're in prison for 15 years and you have a child who's 2 years old when you were imprisoned. When you come back home, that child is 17. If the child was 4 or 5 or 6, you come back home after 15 years, that child is an adult, a full adult. That child has no idea what a father is. And that father has no idea what that child has become. So all of that is taken from you. If you had a job, if you had a business, if you had a livelihood, if you had status, it's all gone. And it reminds you, we were talking about the things that attach us to this dunya as part of the purification of the heart and the soul. That when you are attached to these things, if you lose them, they're taken from you. One of the worst things that a person can encounter is the death of a loved one. And when you lose somebody that's very close to you, it's as if your world has turned upside down. And the Prophet ﷺ would say that we will only say that which pleases Allah at the time of death of his own children. So in some cases, there are brothers who lost their own relatives, including myself. My father's brother, my father's sister passed away when I was in prison. In the cases of many brothers, many, they lost their mothers, they lost their fathers. I know some brothers who lost their children. They passed away. That you know that kid. In fact, there's one brother, his name is Abu Wa'il. He's Syrian. When we were in Pakistan and Afghanistan together, his kid, Wael, used to play with my kids. During the Syrian revolution, his family, that kid Wael, he'd gone back, was about 15 years old. And they were escaping, and he was killed in a bombing while his father's in Guantanamo. And I remember when I eventually spoke to this brother, I said to him, I just wanted to give you condolences. You know what his response was? His response was, do you think you as a father, any father say, would you give this response? His response was, why are you giving me condolences for? My son, he is in Jannah. Inshallah, he's shaheed. His soul is in the hearts of green birds, flying wherever it so wishes. Why are you giving me condolences for? That's what he said to me. So it created a kind of parent and even child. Not to say that this, of course, destroys relationships. How do you build a relationship with a child or a father you don't even know? But this is what was done to these people. They come home, they see kids grown up, adults, marriageable age. Some even got married. And they have no idea, their father has no idea about their kids. Despite all of that, these brothers, and I meet them regularly now with my trips to Afghanistan, are now the heads of their government. Has anybody met the head of intelligence in the UK? Anybody here? Has anybody met the head, the Minister of Foreign Affairs? Or the Minister of Internal Affairs? Or the Minister of Borders? Or the Minister of Libraries and Books? I could give you the list and it's endless. I meet them regularly. But it's not because I'm big. It's not because they're big. It's because they held on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They never gave up. They never went astray. They never became despondent of the mercy of Allah, and they never gave up in their belief and cause. That's why. They were invaded, occupied, usurped, brutalized, bombed, murdered, butchered in their own homes. By whom? Not by a neighboring country, not by Pakistan, not by Iran, not by Tajikistan, not by Uzbekistan, not by Turkmenistan, not by China, but by the United States of America, by Britain, by Australia, by Canada, by New Zealand, by France and Belgium, and all these other nations. And what do these nations have in common? They are the most powerful military force in the world. At the height of the occupation, there were over 100,000 troops from around 30 different nations occupying this land. And just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago in this month, they all left in defeat. They left behind their weapons, they left behind their vehicles, they left behind their helicopters, they left behind their munitions, they left behind logistic vehicles, but most importantly, they left behind their honor. They left behind their honor because they had said, when I was in Afghanistan and they had begun the bombing and dropped the largest bombs known to mankind other than nuclear weapons. So they started to drop bombs that weighed 15,000 pounds. Does anybody have an idea? 15,000 pounds means like about 15 tons. The average car is around what? 2 tons? 1.5. Is there anything that you can think of that weighs 15 tons? How big would that be? A lorry, 15 tons? Yeah. So imagine dropping 15 lorries, like 15-ton lorries, But they don't drop those bombs just one by itself. They drop them in a series in what's known as carpet bombing. So they literally obliterate the entire area. This is also good, important for perspective, because what you're seeing in Afghanistan and Gaza, the difference is it's concentrated. Where they live, the land is far concentrated. Afghanistan's wide and widespread. And they killed something from anything from 100,000 to 250,000. When it comes to our dead, nobody really counts. Nobody cares. What's a few tens of thousands of dead Muslims? Nobody cares. But if you see when people get killed here or in America or anywhere else, every single person dead counts. Does everybody know what happened on 9/11? September the 11th attacks? Yeah? Does anybody know how many people died on September the 11th? Yeah. Anybody know?
About 3.
You see what he said? About 3. Does anybody know how many died?
2,500.
No. You see, it doesn't work that way here. The West doesn't work that way. They know to the single digit how many died. 2,976 people. They counted every single person. They made sure that every single person dead was accounted for. Because to them, lives matter. So if I was to ask you, do you know how many people died in Iraq or Afghanistan? Nobody knows. No politician, no statistician, no military man, no Muslim, no kafir. Nobody knows because nobody cares because, and here's the pun, nobody counts. Nobody counts. Our dead are like the filth of the floodwater. But despite that massive, massive sacrifice of people in Afghanistan, there's a new generation who were born after 9/11, who filled the ranks of the people who fought the occupation. So kids who were around that time were, I was talking about the 5-year-old or the 6-year-old when his father's taken away. By 2015 or so, he's a young man, he's ready to fight. And that's exactly what he does. And he doesn't need a lot of incentive. He's already seen or he has heard. Either he's seen it with his own eyes, or he has heard from his people, from his mother, from his father if he's around, if he's alive, or from the other members of his families, or he's been to the burials of his relatives, of his brothers, of his father, of his uncles, of his relatives, and even sometimes of their younger brothers and children. He doesn't need much incentive. He knows. He knows, even if he wasn't a Muslim, even this had nothing to do with Islam. Let's say it had nothing to do with Islam. Let's say this Vietnam. The population is going to stand up and fight. But with the added beauty of Islam, knowing that you have Ahad al-Husnain, you're going to either get a Nasr, you're going to get victory, or you're going to get Shahada. And just like Abu Wa'il's father, he said, why are you telling me my son's in Jannah? He's flying around in the hearts of green birds. So here you have a land, and if it wasn't already, this is the occupation by the world's greatest power. But there was a time, historically, just in the 1980s, where there was another superpower of the world. It was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. We know it generally as Russia. But its influence extended to, if you know all these countries, Poland and Hungary and Romania and Yugoslavia, all the way to North Korea, from North Korea right across. As a land, if you were to look at it as a land mass, it's the biggest land mass in the world. And that was run by and controlled by the communists of the Union of the USSR. And they decided in 1979 to invade Afghanistan also because some of the people in Afghanistan had decided we're going to have a communist government. And by necessity, the communists at that time believed that you separate religions from politics, but most of them actually believed there's not even a God. The atheists, the communists didn't believe in the concept of a God. The people of Afghanistan are famous, particularly the Pashtuns, but all the others as well. The Tajiks, the Turkoman, the Farsi speakers, the Uzbeks, that we may fight each other, but if you mess with us, then you will not be left alone. We will not tolerate an occupier on our land. Historically speaking, Great Britain, under the British Empire, fought 3 major battles in Afghanistan. And they were defeated in all 3. In one battle, over 10,000 were killed, British soldiers. And they left 1 man alive, a doctor, I forget his name, to go back and tell the rest, this is what's going to happen to you if you come into this place. But the beauty about Afghanistan, and in particularly back then and now, is that they had no compunction, no fear, no reticence, no reservations about calling their fight like it was. We are doing jihad in the path of Allah to throw out the enemy occupier and to bring back the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this land. All the groups, though there were different types of groups at that time in the 1980s, they all had different ideas and directions, but they all united in fighting against the occupier, the communist, Soviet, atheist empire. And it took a lot of blood, a lot of prison, a lot of torture, a lot of abuse, a lot of loss, lots of refugees, if you go through Afghanistan to this day, you'll come across, maybe in Gaza now it's like that, but you come across every few people, somebody's leg is missing. He's got a prosthetic leg. He's got an eye missing. He's got an arm missing. He's got a leg missing. He's got a foot missing. It's normal. It's normal. People lost their legs sometimes through walking through a landmine, through a minefield. Children. The graveyards are so full, they just have to rebury over the dead from before. It's a place like you've never come across. And through that sacrifice against the Soviets, some argue it was only about 20 to 30,000 dead Soviet soldiers. Some say 50,000. But it was over 1 million Afghans. So victory and defeat isn't about numbers. It's about the will to stay the course. It's about who's going to last the longest. Famously, the leader of the Taliban back in the Americans first occupied Afghanistan in 2002, he said, the Americans may have all the weapons, but we have all the time. I want you to think about that. Because we as a people, here in particular, we are so impatient. If we don't get what we want within minutes, we're on the blower, we're on the phone, we're complaining, we're writing emails, sending text messages, sending WhatsApp notes. This didn't come in Gmail. Where is my thing? Ordered something. Why isn't it not here? Do you think we as a collective here, are the kind of caliber of people that Allah Azza wa Jal would give victory to? Because you have to have a preparation. You have to be mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically prepared. And one of the reasons why I'm even choosing to talk to you about this is to give you a snapshot of an experience, not that I'm part of that, but I've seen and witnessed some of it, to relay some of the message to you. That the people, as I said, the country has been invaded by the greatest powers that the world has ever seen. There was nothing more powerful than the British Empire at the time of at the height of the empire. In fact, we were talking about how the famous saying was, the sun never sets on the British Empire. But one of the reasons why the sun did set on the empire was what happened in Afghanistan to the empire. Now you saw that within 2 years of the Soviet Union being defeated in Afghanistan, the entire Soviet Union broke up. It disintegrated. all of these countries, Poland and Hungary and Romania and Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania, they all sought independence. They all became separate. They all cut off from the Soviet Union. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, all of them cut off. They all became independent. But the defeat, the physical military defeat of the Soviets took place in Afghanistan. So the world has Afghanistan to thank for the defeat of communism's most powerful advocate. But you'll never hear that. Nobody will say that. They'll say it's because of democracy and because of the freedom of movements and the free market and so forth. But nobody will tell you that actually it was what happened there. And similarly, when you're in Afghanistan now today, there are lots of problems. There's poverty. There's people who are reliant on support from aid organizations. There is a lack of medical provision and so forth. But what there isn't a lack of, remember I said the Americans left their honor behind. What there isn't a lack of in Afghanistan is honor and dignity. And for us as an ummah, and for us here in particular, we really need to look at places where we see some dignity, some honor, some self-respect. Some of you come from Birmingham. I'm going to tell you something. The streets of Birmingham are filthy. They're disgusting. They're horrible. They're the worst I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot of horrible places. It's disgusting. And we're a first world country. We're one of the most powerful, most advanced countries in the world. Yet the streets of Birmingham, and in particular where the Muslims live, are the worst that you'll ever see. It's horrible. It's a dump. Yet when I go to the streets of Kabul, even in the worst of areas, you won't find it like that. In Kabul, there's sometimes a lack of water. Many times during the day, they have no electricity, so it goes off. You'll see kids sometimes begging in the streets. You see amputees pulling themselves along on the floor, begging sometimes. But what you won't see is filth. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because they have self-dignity, self-respect. We don't. If we did, our homes and in front of them, at least if nothing else, would be cleaned. But our entire area is overrun with filth. And that you can't blame anyone for that. You can't blame anyone for that except us. We're responsible. So there's much to learn from places that are quote unquote third world, developing. But in Afghanistan, there's such a uniqueness that you honestly cannot feel it anywhere else in the world. Certainly not Mecca or Medina, unfortunately. You might feel a spiritual connection if you see the Kaaba and Masjid al-Nabawi, but you will not feel that this is a place that is run by people of honor and dignity for the Ummah. You'll never feel that. But when you go to Afghanistan, that's what you feel. And because of the people's connection and devotion to Islam, that they know when they fought, they did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they got killed, they weren't afraid at all. In fact, they welcomed it for the sake of Allah. Rarely will you come across a people, except maybe in Gaza, where entire families were killed, where you find one person left alive out of other brothers, 7, 8, 9 brothers. One person. Because everyone, either against the Soviets or against the USA, was killed. And finally, I'm going to end with this thing. I was in the Bagram prison with a young man. His name was Sharif. I've been looking for him all this time, still trying to find him. I haven't been able to find him. He had one eye, which he lost as a child during the time of the Soviets. And when we were in the Bagram prison, there's a point at which kind of an altercation occurred, a little fight, a verbal fight between him and the soldiers, the American soldiers. Started to scream at him, and he started to speak back to them. And he spoke English well, and he spoke Arabic also. And his father had been killed by the Soviet soldiers right outside the prison where we were. He was buried alive. And I went and checked to see if this actually happened, because he said to me, my father was buried alive right outside here. And I went and checked online to see, did it occur? Was there a mass burial of people alive by the Soviet soldiers in the 1980s? And I discovered that there really was. So he wasn't making it up. He said to the American soldiers who were trying to, I don't know, say something to him or to curse him or attack him, he looked at them and he said, my father was buried alive out here by the last superpower that occupied this land. He said, do you really think that his son is going to bow his head down to you? And that left such a powerful image in my mind about how these people are, how this is a unique place, historically speaking, in modern times also. And this isn't to say that such people are vicious and harsh. You know, it's famous amongst Afghan mujahideen that they'll put a flower in their assault rifle. They love colors. They love beauty. It's a beautiful land. There are rivers and lakes and the most beautiful fruits, pomegranates and cherries and the most beautiful, tasty grapes you'll ever come across, nuts. And every Afghan loves meat. Sometimes they have meat for breakfast, meat for lunch, and meat for dinner. You know, I went to one place for a restaurant. I thought maybe you can have some eggs. They said, we got no egg, but we got kebab. And the kebabs for them is not the little pieces of meat that are cut and barbecued. It's a very unique people, unique place, and it deserves our dua first and foremost, particularly those who are now running the place. Who can you think of in the world? Just think of in the world. Can you think of anywhere in the world? I thought of one place where long-term prisoners come out and become its leaders. Anybody think of anybody? South Africa, Mandela. Look how the world respected Mandela. Some of you may study in school, in politics or whatever. Nelson Mandela was at some point the most respected man in the world. But you won't hear it about these guys because they fought, Mandela fought. They went to prison, he went to prison. He believed in living and dying for his cause. They believed in living and dying for their cause. But one is respected, one is still demonized. And so the other thing we should do for them, inshallah, for this place, is try to assist them, try to visit, encourage people to visit, learn, study, gain knowledge, and disseminate it. And as I told you in the beginning, particularly, and I'm looking to the youth here, remember Omar Khadr, remember Muhammad Jawad, remember the little kid separated from his brother. In Guantanamo, we had a camp called Camp Iguana. The Americans used to call it Camp Bambino. It was for the kids of Guantanamo. It was for the kids, a prison camp for the kids. Because as you see, when they go for the kids in Gaza and in Palestine, sometimes they may drop bombs and the kids are just killed because the adults are there. But other times they actually target the children. They'll take a sniper rifle, aim from a distance, and aim for the child. There are reports even before the whole thing had happened in Gaza that the bullet wounds on children that were killed were very specific, aimed at the heart or the head. And there was a full investigation into that. And the evidence showed overwhelmingly that the Israeli soldiers were aiming for children. Because they believe, just like Pharaoh. Remember the story of Pharaoh? Who does he want to kill? He wants to kill يُذَبِّحْنَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ. That they were killing the children because he knew and believed that from amongst these children someone is going to rise. And he didn't know the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the very child that you're trying to kill is actually going to rise in your house. And that's what happened. Musa alayhi salam was raised in the house of Fir'aun. So he knew Fir'aun better than anyone else. So that's why you'll find them targeting children. Though they claim to be the followers of Musa alayhi salam, Israel claims to be the followers of Musa alayhi salam. They claim to be the followers of Dawood alayhi salam. They have the Najm al-Dawood, or the Star of Dawood, the Mogan David, as their sign. If you know the story of Dawood alayhi salam, what does he do? He takes a slingshot, وَقَتَلَ دَاوُدُ الْجَالُوتِ, and he kills Jalut, the big giant. So they claim that we're the inheritors of Dawood alayhi salam. They have all his symbolism on their flag. But today, who has the sling stone against the tank? Palestinians. So don't be fooled by their imagery and their terminology. So in the end, this was focused to the young. Pray Allah Azza wa Jal allows us to assist, help, pray for, be assistance to, and make a better environment for people to understand the struggles and the past of Afghanistan, and that it indeed becomes a hope for the Ummah. Wa sallallahu sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Any Q&A, any questions? Any questions? Huh? Any questions? I'd like to take them from the kids primarily, because the adults are adults. Departments, whether it's defense, foreign ministry, interior ministry, borders, and cultural information, and intelligence, all of these.
So